And we're back. It's I'm Sam Seidel, your host, and we've got Mike Tilford back on Quick Takes on Unplanned. Mike, first of all, good to see you again. Th
See you, Sam.
Thanks for being willing to do it this week. I know you had a busy day today, so you carved out a little time for us. So I really appreciate that.
It's an important conversation, particularly with all the stuff going on in Cambridge right now.
Yeah, totally fascinating. I want to make a brief confession. I was riding my bike back here from down Kendall Square area, and I was like, "What if we called this the Salmon Mike Show?" But it's like salmon like the fish and Mike like the microphone, and people would be like, "Why are they calling it that?"
You
Anyway,
know, you might we're going to get if we're lucky, 7 people watching this.
exactly,
That
exactly.
makes
But we're gonna expand.
it's
It's
like a
gonna
debate.
grow. It's gonna grow. Which
Sure.
reminds me to all you viewers, hit like, hit subscribe. We want the views. We want the viewers because we're gonna have a great conversation. Mike, we were asking what how did we phrase it last week? How much should a developer make?
We were asking that question. I thought about it all week, and I think we're asking the wrong question because there is it gets down to there. You'll of course receive varying opinions of how much a city should or needs to grow. But right now, there are no units being built. I mean, there's some stuff that's been in the pipeline for a long time that's under construction, certainly. But it's kind of like a pump, and the pump is not primed. Projects aren't happening. So I think the better question is how much does a developer need to make to develop the building we talked about?
Yeah, so let's before we get into like the actual nitty-gritty of that question, spend a little bit of time on the pump and the priming because there is construction going on. I actually was just going past a building and I was having the thought like, I wonder if that steel is about to get much more expensive over the next couple of weeks. But what is that whole thing about the priming the pump and kind of what kind of a lead time? Help us understand that a little more.
It varies by municipality, of course, and I think places like Cambridge, where there's a lot of passion for the city, and most everything prescriptively is by a special permit, effectively. So there's a large, long process to conceive of, acquire land, and entitle a building that can run between a year to 3 years pretty easily.
Right, to get from that first moment all the way through to what to actually digging in the ground or to the final.
Yeah, to getting a building permit. There's a lot of different permits along the way. I don't want to get bogged down. You and I are trying to make this accessible and easy to follow for people who don't spend a lot of time with it because everyone's busy. Who has time for this? But it's such an important issue, and there's a lot of nuances to it. So, broadly speaking, yeah, it can take quite some time to actually conceive of, design, and entitle a project to the point where you're putting a shovel in the ground. Then you got to build it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You make a really good point. Is we are having a conversation about a subject that is both important and that is interesting to us. But part of our task is to make it available and interesting to other people who may not live in the world of planning or development or et cetera.
It's this huge urban planning issue, an economics issue that it literally is a physical city. And I think that it's been constrained for so long, just people like us, effectively, either policymakers, developers, a very small cadre of people. And the conversation gets lost and we lose a truly representative opinion on it. So, yeah, we got to make it easy somehow.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's going to be our test. That's like our challenge as we go along is to figure out how to communicate this stuff well so people A can understand what we're talking about and B are like, wow, that's interesting. Didn't realize
Hopefully,
that.
hopefully not be boring.
Yeah, exactly. So if the how much should a developer make is not the right question, what do you think is the right question? What's the right question we should be what's the question we should be asking instead?
So I think we arrived at two things last conversation to help frame where we're going with this. One is how much should a developer make, which I want to rephrase is how much does a developer need to make to move forward with a project? Because I think that is more germane. Because how about this? I think there's a perception that development is always extremely profitable. I was looking in Cambridge Day's comments over the recent story about the question on the inclusionary zoning stuff, which again, before we get all jargony, the required amount of affordable units a developer has to put into their project. And it was a commenter saying, anybody who claims that developers aren't making a ton of money is just absolutely crazy. And again, you can't live by the comment section of any particular publication. It'll go crazy. But I would say this: if that were true, why aren't there more things being built?
Yeah, and just to tag onto that issue you were just pointing to, last Monday, the Cambridge City Council was actually looking at whether or not they should lower the inclusionary requirements in new construction, in part to make it more possible to build buildings because nothing's getting built right now. My understanding is they didn't get anywhere in the conversation. They talked for a long time, but they didn't make any choices or decisions. They charter righted it, which just means they put it on the table and they'll come back to it at some point or they won't. But for right now, it's not an active discussion.
It's such a big topic. I wouldn't expect something like that to necessarily consume like one meeting. And let's be clear: I don't think in the course of development urban planning, there's nothing wrong with any of these requirements. Let's call it BERT or BUTO, or sort of net zero, or more affordable housing. These are all laudable goals. The issue is so many laudable social goals are put onto a project that at this point in time it's stuck. They're not happening. And the person who's sort of said the unpopular thing out loud has been Patrick Barrett, who is a owner operator. He's a friend, so I have to say that. I guess a function of disclosure.
Right.
And he,
Patrick, we're dragging you into this conversation, whether you wanted to be in it or not.
I think he wants to be in it.
Yeah.
He definitely wants to be in it because he has been appropriately vocal in saying the hard things out loud. A lot of people aren't doing that, but so it's important to say, like, yeah, this is a big deal. This inclusionary zoning, it's resulted in some great outcomes as far as mixed income housing is concerned. We like to see it continue, but things aren't, and so there has to be a discussion on what can happen and what has to give for things to happen, because there's just too many requirements.
Yeah. So here we are. We're still in quick takes mode. So we're going to be talking for 10 minutes total, thereabouts, plus or minus. And I think the way we're going to do this is we're going to kind of walk through this in probably successive conversations, looking at different aspects of this, and then trying to piece together the fuller picture, the fuller story. And as I recall it, we were going to start today with just with rents. Just looking at what the rental picture is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is a city we both know well and we both interact with and have interacted with. And we're just going to try and get a sense of what's the situation out there, or to look at it a different way. And I'm just going to point to this guy because your quiz question is, do you know who that is?
Wow, you can't quiz question me. I can barely see through the screen on this one.
Good point. Adam Smith. I put up Adam Smith. So what is the market? What is the market telling us? So
the invisible hand. Okay, got you. I thought you were going to keep building on your earlier portraits from last week. That's fine.
Well, no. So I was trying to think about that, and maybe that's the other way to go. Is we could just fill up the whole wall back here. That's maybe a whole other. It could be like the Ohio State Buckeyes on the football helmet. As they add
people to it. No, I get it. Okay, so you're right, and I think it's tell you what I did. So in addition to saying how much does the developer need to make, we talked about it being a couple of things: multifamily, for rent, within a scale of about 100 units, and in Cambridge. And so here I'll share something that I think is interesting, and anyone can access this data if they're remotely curious. And it's simple. It's
okay. And just we're gonna go into this, and we'll come back to it. So, Mike, take it away. Tell us. Yeah, here we are, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
I've owned my home since 2018. Sam, you've had yours for a while too. And I think something that's interesting is you tend to tune out of the rental market when you're not in it. When my wife and I were renting around Boston, we would move around quite often, and I could tell you very specifically what stuff was going for. So it's always eye-opening to revisit this picture. And this is something developers just do constantly, and they rely upon third parties too. But this is apartments.com. It's very easy and accessible, and you can just sort of scroll over and see, what things are renting for. For example, here, this is a one bed, one bath, 786 square feet for $4,250 a month on 100 Lansdowne Street. So and I think our hypothetical, Sam, what I'd like to choose is the lot on the corner of
But
Vassar.
before we, sorry, I hate to do this. Before we zoom in too closely, just for people who don't know Cambridge that well, where are we looking right now? We got the Charles River. I see the Charles River down at the base there. So
Yeah.
just locate us a little bit. And
No, that's a great point. So you have MIT right here,
right,
which is just a tremendous asset for the city as well as for rentals. Clearly, this is Kendall Square, the most creative square mile on earth, is one of its claims. Excuse me here, and so this is driving into Central Square in
yeah,
Cambridge. It says
yeah,
here, that's the general layout of where we're looking right now. And of course,
yeah,
the stuff over here is Boston.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so what you were saying? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's okay. I think would be a really interesting hypothetical lot because, let's be clear, this is a academic study exercise. This isn't real, but that lot on the corner of Mass Ave and Vassar, this one
Yeah.
in between the tracks. So right,
We've
right,
lost your map now. We're back to us. So if you want to map it, I think we got to get the map back up because
all
we're.
right. Hold on. Tell you what, and straight back to us. Huh?
But yeah, so I know where I can picture where you're talking about. I can picture the intersection. It's at Mass Avenue, Vassar, right there. There's train tracks right there. It's
I
kind
think
of
I'm going to bring.
this sort of weird border region in a way. It's kind of an odd
It
spot.
is, but it's also not. I mean, you could. We have to pick somewhere, right? You got to put
Yeah,
a
yeah,
rent,
yeah.
and there are elements, but the rents I was showing you, I think, are the ones that were reflective of what could be achieved in an area like that. And it's
Right.
also a blank lot, so it's not. There's a building on it to go for. But so here's what I did for a hypothetical exercise.
Yeah.
Here's the mark. You can see the screen, right?
Yep. I can
All
see
right.
it.
So I just took 5 of those rents from apartments.com, and people can. I think I did a good job of not trying to grab the highest or the lowest. Obviously we could expand this list, but what's interesting is I think for a lot of people who haven't been in the rental market for some time, you look at a one bed one bath and it's being listed for 3780 a month. Does that
Right.
adjust your understanding? I again, I've been out of the market for a while, but you can go down the whole thing from studios to two. Again, this is just 5, 6 data points,
Right.
and it's putting out an average of a number that I consistently see, which is about $6 a square foot per month, which is how people tend to quote that. That's
Yeah.
a sizable amount of money.
Yeah. I mean, those numbers, those gross rents, the full amount per the square footage is, I mean, 345 square feet for 2250. I mean, oh my gosh.
That is a studio or efficiency, and there's been increasingly more of those built. They serve a purpose, but it's bare bones in a lot of ways. There's no extra study area or large expansive kitchen, none of that.
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily unique. So in my mind, this does two things. It helps us understand what a project can achieve on a gross rental income basis, and it also probably highlights, frankly, why people have been so passionate about the affordable housing conversation because this isn't a mystery. It's extremely expensive to live here and only growing.
Yes. And so we're going to have to think about how we're going to kind of walk through this conversation because I worry that we may get very detailed very quickly and very sort of in the weeds of this world. And we got to remember to keep it general enough so Joe or Jane, interested viewer, can follow along with us.
Well, fair enough, but Joe and Jane are going to have to endure some very basic math and be partially bored. So let me make one last final point,
Yeah.
and then we can get off the screen. What I did is I said, all right, let's say our hypothetical building that we're going to present next week is 100 units, right?
Yeah.
And it's 20% studios, 40% one bed, 40% two beds.
Yeah.
And let's just say this building is 100% market. So all 100 units are charged at market. And I use the very basic market rental rate table over there. So, okay, great. So there's, the studios at 2250, one bed at 3780, two bed at 3900,
Yeah.
same unit count. What you get there is a potential for that building to generate $352,000 gross per month or $4.2 million annually.
Okay, I'm going to
growth.
pause. I'm going to pause you right there
Right.
and just fill in a little bit of the backstory. So the idea here, and we didn't spend a lot of time in the map because I kind of redirected you to a sort of gross, a sort of broader angle on it, is we're going to take this lot and we're going to build a hypothetical building on that lot, right?
That's the idea.
And maybe one of the things we could do for one of our episodes is actually go down to the lot with a camera and we could show people what we're actually talking about, so they can visualize what we're talking about. But the idea is that we're going to build a building on that, and you're throwing up some of the numbers from that are sort of our best guesstimates as to what that new building would generate. Is that fair? Is that
It's totally fair, and it may not be exactly that lot. We have to see what fits, and we're going to have some friends in the architectural world help us out a little bit.
okay?
But yeah, what we're saying here, we're pausing, no more numbers. But if you look at the selections of rental rates we have chosen, and again, I would love it if someone were to do a more expansive deep dive and try to tell me it's more or less than this. But and then you apply this unit mix to this building, the building's potential income before any affordable requirement is layered in is that number, 4.2 million annually.
Okay, and so that's what that building will, just to understand that number a little bit more, that's what that will generate in total during the year in rental income. Am I getting all that correct? Or
That is the outer bounds of the absolute maximum possibility that building can generate. What we're going to do after that is introduce concepts like vacancy, and then affordability, and then the big items. We're not going to go through all of it. The big items and operating expenses to arrive at what a building can actually net or what it returned to an investor or developer group, which then had to pay a bank, et cetera. So we're starting with the absolute maximum, highest number, gross potential that you can achieve. And then as we unfold this building, we're going to look at the things that take that number down. Because quite frankly, $4.2 million a year seems like a ton of money, right?
right now, just to on our process, is this what I mean, you've been in the development world yourself, but is this what a developer would do? Is they would start at this point, figure out that number, they'd sort of do this rental calculation, if you will, and then they'll kind of work their way back from there. Is this typically what happens in the development world, and when they're
Yeah, but the development world is the tension I run in with our format here, which is we're trying to make it easy and understandable. So a development pro forma would be multiple sheets longer, hundreds of entries, and far more sophisticated than this. But at the end of the day, this I think does the job, and I'm happy to get into discussion with people in the development world about how you balance trying to explain what it is we do in a broad, understandable scale. The good news is it's not very complicated. So,
Yeah,
and
this is
then
brilliant. And I sorry, I interrupted you. Go
no,
ahead.
that's it. You're right. So
No,
that's you
no, no. I
start with.
think for this starting point, this is a great way to do it, and we should do it at this level because obviously, the more info you layer in here, the easier it is to kind of get lost in terms of what's this referring to and what's that referring to.
Yeah,
Are
you
we
don't
going to
charge
talk
me.
about Are we going to talk about the cost of getting the money and all that sort of stuff? Is that factoring in?
Absolutely, it is, and I think we've reached the threshold for math. But yeah, I think the idea is we're going to try to layer this in piece by piece, so people could actually go back and look, verify, challenge, comment, whatever. But the intent really is to try to demonstrate, again, what number you got to make that building happen because it's not happening.
Well, at this point, why don't we say that we're going to rejoin this conversation? We're going to ask all our viewers to come back next week, and we'll pick it up from here. How about that?
Absolutely. I think next week we're going to look at is how affordability is determined, and that is through HUD. And it is a combination of two things. One is what's called the area median income, and then the other is the percentage of that income which spits out a rent. And you have to adapt it a little bit, but it's a rent for like, okay, a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom unit, and we can look at the difference between those rents and the market rents we saw and see why this is meaningful to those numbers.
Absolutely perfect. And so we'll bring up that issue. We'll look at that issue of affordability, how those numbers are derived. We'll get into some of those HUD tables, and we're just going to walk people through this so that they can understand it and we can understand it. And then and then once we've got enough of a solid understanding, we can begin to have discussions about what are our priorities and what do we want to focus on. Well, those are all conversations for future episodes. So come back check back next week. Remember to hit subscribe. And Mike, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.